afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Kushner, and I will just say welcome. I'm excited to be getting started on this very important task force to address the state workforce and retiring employees in the state of Connecticut, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Senator Kushner, and welcome.
Representative Porter, that is our next meeting. This meeting is the task force to study cancer relief benefits for firefighters.
Okay. And I should know that, seeing Rick Hart smiling at me now. We got it backwards because I thought that was scheduled for 3 p.m. So thank you for the correction. Welcome all, and I'm looking forward to getting started.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know we had confirmations from our ranking members of the Labor Committee, but I don't see them on at this moment. So I think we'll begin by doing introductions, and I will just call out the names. It's a little easier than being random. So I'm going to start with the members of the committee of the task force, and I will start with David Morrissey. I think you are here. Yes, go ahead, Dave. Do you want to say a couple of words about yourself? You're muted. Dave, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for 40 years. I've represented many police officers and firefighters throughout my career. Do a lot with the Heart and Hypertension Act. I specialize in workers' comp. That's pretty much what I do. So I'm happy to be part of this and do some research and do whatever I can to help the committee.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Mr. Morrissey was appointed by the Speaker of the House. Next I have, is Bright Johnson here? Yes, hi Bright. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Bright Johnson. I'm the State Director of Government Relations for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
And just real quick, Senator Kushner, I just want to bring it to your attention that the ranking member for the House is with us now, Representative Aurora.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think what I'll do is I'll come back to Representative Aurora when we've done the introductions, if that's all right. And next, so I did want to point out that Mr. Johnson was appointed by the Speaker of the House. Next, I have Bob Smith. Is Bob with us?
I am, Senator.
Oh, yes. Thank
Hello,
you.
everybody. Bob Smith, career firefighter, Fairfield, Connecticut, 25 years. I'm also the district vice president for the Uniformed Professional Firefighters of Connecticut. My charge is health and safety for firefighters, career firefighters around the state of Connecticut. I was asked by President Carosa to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to helping however I can.
Thank you so much. And Bob is being appointed by the President of the Senate. Next, we have Attorney Francis Drapeau. Drapeau, did I say your name right?
Yeah, you can call me Bud, please. Nobody calls me Francis, not even my mother. So, like Dave, I am a board certified workers' comp specialist. I'm a lawyer representing workers.
That was actually kind of funny. You're like, what was that?
Courtney, I'm sorry, but you're not muted. Courtney, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'm a lawyer representing injured workers. I've been doing it for about 30 years. Honored to be on this committee.
Thank you. And Bud is another appointee of the President of the Senate. Next, we have Rick Hart.
Good afternoon, Rick Hart, formerly with the Uniformed Professional Firefighters Association, currently fire chief in Bristol, Connecticut. I was actually the lobbyist that worked on the original bill back in 2016-17 to get this into statute. Looking forward to working with everyone here to make this statute better for our firefighters. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick was appointed by the Majority Leader of the House. And do I see Vaughn Dumas?
Yes, good afternoon. Vaughn Dumas. I am a former president of the Connecticut State Firefighters Association who worked with both lobbyists Rick Hart and Ted Schroll on the original bill. I currently serve on the cancer board for the CSFA, and I am also a fire chief in the town of Orange.
Great, thank you. And Bonnie was appointed by the majority leader of the Senate. And finally, I think William Adamson. Is Bill here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Bill Adamson. I am an insurance professional with 46 years in the business. I founded a company called 7710 Insurance Company, company founded in 15 to write workers' compensation for firefighters and EMTs. We write in 39 states. We focus heavily on injury prevention and well-being of firefighters and EMTs. And I have 4 firefighters on staff in my risk control operation. And we've got 12 fire districts as customers, 6 ambulance entities, and we're looking to help our customers.
Thank you. And your appointment was made by the minority leader of the House. And before I move to some other staff members who are going to play a role here, I do want to introduce Ranking Member Harry Aurora. Representative Aurora is Ranking Member on Labor. And Harry, we did a few little comments, brief comments at the beginning, just to say hello if you'd like a moment.
And thank you, Senator Kushner, and thank you, Chair Porter, and welcome to all of you. And I'm looking forward to listening in and to basically giving my input and to address this challenge and the problem we are here to solve. So I'm all ears and glad to be part of it.
Thank you. And before we move to the third item on the agenda, I would like to recognize Courtney Cullen, who is on this Zoom today. She's managing a couple of meetings at the same time, but we're happy to have Courtney here because Courtney was also involved in the original working group that worked on the legislation that created the Cancer Relief Fund. We also have with us Greg Hannon. Oh, and Courtney represents the Senate Democrats, and we have Greg Hannon, who is here as well, who represents the House Republicans. And, you know, there are a number of other staff members who are present. I know they're listening in, and, you know, you should feel free if at any moment you feel there's something you can add to the conversation. We would like to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to participate so that we get, you know, the best information going forward. So do not hesitate if there's something you feel is important for us to know. I would like to start by reviewing the scope of this task force. And as you know, this task force was a part of Special Act number 2135. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph, which describes the charge of the task force. I hope you've all seen this, but in case you haven't, and for those of you who are listening, we passed legislation and it was signed into law that there is established a task force to study cancer relief benefits for firefighters. Such study shall include, but need not be limited to, an examination of 1, the adequacy of the firefighters cancer relief program established pursuant to section 7-313J of the general statutes, and 2, the feasibility and implications of providing workers' compensation and other benefits, including death benefits, to firefighters who are diagnosed with cancer acquired as a result of occupational exposure to noxious fumes or poisonous gases. And I do want to say that in consideration of this legislation this year, we heard testimony from numerous firefighters who described, and their survivors, who described the exposures and the risk that is taken by firefighters every time they go into a building that's on fire due to the noxious chemicals that they're exposed to. And, you know, before we begin, I want to let everyone on the task force know that, you know, this testimony was critical to our developing this this special act. We recognize that we have such a debt of gratitude to those who serve as firefighters and risk their lives to protect our homes and our property and our communities. And, so many of them, I know Representative Porter with a rough year when we lost a firefighter that, and one was quite injured that you were close to. This is, it is work that we ask people to put themselves out there and risk their lives. And we often feel that we're not living up to our obligation to care for them, particularly those that are developed cancer. And so, I think we were all very moved by the testimony we heard. And as a result, we determined that it was good to revisit the issue of this cancer relief fund and look at it from the aspect of the firefighters. Are we doing enough to protect and care for the people who serve us? So I know Representative Porter, you might want to add a few words.
I absolutely agree with everything that you've said, and just want to just take a moment of silence, if you don't mind, Senator Kushner, for all the firefighters that have actually, given the ultimate sacrifice, their lives in service. Thank you. And just to reiterate what you said, the work that you do is, there's no price that can be put on it. And we understand the importance of the work that we're going to be discussing during this time on the task force, and just really looking forward to coming to a conclusion that is going to cover our first responders, our firefighters, in a way that will honor them, in such a way that they deserve. So thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you. I do want to let the task force know that in preparation for this meeting, myself and Representative Porter, we did request from the state auditors an accounting to ascertain the status of the funds, and did receive a communication that confirmed that, in fact, as of November 18, 2021, $800,000 has been appropriated to the Firefighters Cancer Relief Program, and no monies have been expended. And I do believe that is based on an interpretation of the original act that that projected that benefits would begin to be paid out of this fund starting in 2022. So based on that, what I thought would be helpful is if we started with conversation, especially from those of you who have either worked on the fund in the past, on the creation of the funds, to give us your perspective on sort of the history of the development of the fund, which, by the way, the original act, I believe, was in 2016, but there were some issues about the way the Public Act 1610 had been, the allocation of funds was not found to be legal under PURA. So in 2017, there was a June special session, and that act was Public Act 17-2 was passed, which created the allocation of $400,000 in fiscal year 19 and $400,000 in fiscal year 20. And it was then later, and then I believe it was later further acted on in Public Act 1881. So we can get folks those citations if they're helpful to you. But essentially at this point, I think what would be best for us is to understand sort of the genesis of this fund, and particularly from those of you who were involved in the past. And I know a couple of you mentioned that you were. I know I heard both from Rick Hart and from Von Dumas. And I know Courtney Cullen, and who is on the call, also has some experience with the working group. So I don't know who wants to begin. Rick, maybe you could open this up because you were working on this bill that we passed this year, last session.
Thank you, Senator. So back in 2016, Representative Michelle Cook approached me as far to discuss getting cancer relief for firefighters. She had a very good friend of hers that was a deputy chief in Torrington that was diagnosed with cancer. And it was virtually impossible to get him any workers' comp benefits that were currently in effect at that time. He subsequently passed as a result of his cancer. He had a rare form of cancer that that originated in his jaw, which is not covered under, it's not specified within the workers' comp statute as it read then. So we convened a working group with members from the Uniform Professional Firefighters Association. Both sides of the aisle had membership, Senator Wong and Representative Ritigliano from the Republican Party, and Representative Cook chaired the working group. And it was myself, Chris Tracy from the UPFFA, Scott Merchant from the UPFFA, and Vince Fusco from the UPFFA as well, representing the career firefighters. And then we had Ted Schroll, who was the head lobbyist for the Connecticut State Firefighters Association, and he took the task of representing the volunteers. So throughout, and members of CCM were also involved in the working group, and throughout the negotiations, it was, we realized that we were not going to get it into workers' comp. Despite the compelling evidence of numerous studies by organizations that are very well respected across the country and around the world, linking firefighting and cancer inextricably. So we decided to basically negotiate a fund where our membership was not forced to use their sick time, go into bankruptcy because they had to be out sick to get treatment and work their way through their cancer treatments. So the fund was established, and as Senator Kushner said, it was initially linked to the telecommunications fee. It's 51 cents every month on every landline and cell phone. And it would have generated about $14 million, I believe, at the time to put into a fund. It was brought to our attention that the state would have forfeited federal monies if that was allowed to stay in effect. So again, in 2017, in the special session, the appropriation of $400,000 a year was enacted. And unfortunately, former Governor Malloy swept the account during his austerity budgets, and so we were back down to zero. So Governor Lamont has funded it the past 2 years, and that's why there's only $800,000 in it, which is not sufficient. This coverage is well and good for people that, for our membership, that will recover from their cancer, whether or not they are able to continue their careers is another question. One person I want to mention is Caroline Johnson. Her husband was a firefighter in West Hartford who was diagnosed with cancer, died. She's actually on Husky now because there were no benefits afforded her by the municipality in covering her husband's passing, which I think is criminal. You know, you go from heroes to zeros when the time and the opportunity affords itself. And for that, we will be fighting to get these benefits, death benefits and retirement benefits under workers' comp, so that the municipality I would like to see an irrebuttable presumption. I know that's a reach, but I think that the science is compelling and it proves our point. as to the effect that firefighting has on our health. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Sorry for editorializing.
That's okay. I think we're interested in people being comfortable with sharing their views here because we learn from everyone. I think next, is there anyone, I don't know, Vaughn, you want to add to that?
It's Vaughn. Yeah, I just want to add, first I want to thank Rick Hart for his work back in 2016 when I was president. He did a lot of the spearhead work and all the research. And where the CSFA and I came into play was the part for the disbursements for the funds and how to apply for the funds. And our subcommittee is still working on a proper statewide form because there's so many different forms that the state uses or fire service use for various exposures while they're doing their jobs as firefighters. That subcommittee consists of Bruce Dixon, William Abbott, John Carew, Rick Hart, and myself. Due to COVID, our meetings were very limited. We've only had 2 in-person meetings, 1 Zoom meeting. So the current process that came up with to replace the former process that was deemed not a proper one is that the person would apply for the benefits through a form that is agreed upon with the CSFA and the various fire service organizations, UPFFA, Fire Chiefs Association, Connecticut Career Chiefs, and such forth. And then that process would begin. And I guess I'm here and I'm still concerned or wanting to learn more about where that goes after that. So the CSFA will vet the claim forms as we do right now for the injury. We are the repository for injuries for firefighters, where we get the forms received, we validate, confirm that the injury did occur and it meets the criteria, and it's forwarded on to the state to have monies dispersed. So that process is in place. But is it the same recipient process when we forward once we validate a claim and can confirm that the person meets all the criteria and should be awarded some monies and be dispersed? Does it go to the same place or is it going to somebody different? And that's part of why I want to be involved here and bring this information back to the subcommittee so we can start moving forward with the process.
Okay, thank you. And where do the injury forms go now? What is the current process?
So currently through this Connecticut State Firefighters Association, there's legislation that appoints us to be the repository that if a firefighter is injured in the line of duty or killed in the line of duty, the documentation gets sent to the firefighter or the fire chief, depending on the situation. They forward the information, which is a brief summary of the incident. We review it, validate it, and send back a full claims form, which requires medical sign off, the fire chief sign off, and such forth, and medical documentation, or God forbid, a death certificate or something like that to validate that there was a line of duty incident. And then once all that is confirmed and vetted, we send it through the Secretary of State to get money to send to the family or to the victim of the injury.
To the Secretary of State?
Yes, I believe so. Not 100%, but I'm 90% on that.
Okay. Because the reason I asked that is I know that under this legislation or this act, the treasurer's office is required to file reports. So it made me think that perhaps it was the treasurer's office that would be the responsible agency that you would send it to. But we can certainly look into that and give you a response on that. I think one concern I have is, as we mentioned at the outset, this fund is supposed to be available to firefighters starting in 2022. So it does concern me that the form hasn't been finalized. And do you have a timeline on when you think the form will be ready?
We were hoping to meet and have it completed in January, right after the holidays. We're going to get together with Jeff Marset, who is a copy of a state form that's used, and Rick Hart provided us with the UPFA form. And we have to make it a standardized form because there's International Association of Firefighters, there's a state form, and there's Uniform Professional Firefighters forms. So it has to be a standardized form that meets the criteria of all of those organizations and all of the committees within the state. Jeff Morissette is helping me spearhead getting the final claim type form that would be standardized for the state of Connecticut firefighters to use.
So do you think, does it seem like you'll be in a position where in January when you meet, you'll be signing off on a form?
We're very close to that, yes. We are having a legislative meeting with the CSFA next week, and it's going to be presented there for approval through that process. And then hopefully January will be signed off by the committee members.
Okay. I know there are others that are here that were involved in the original conversations, and I'd been able to be in discussion with Courtney Cullen, and Courtney, I don't know if you're available now. I know you're trying to manage 2 meetings, but I wondered if there was something you might want to add to the conversation regarding the development of this cancer relief fund. I'm guessing Courtney might not be available right now, but if some of the staff that work with Courtney can let her know when she is available, she should come back on, and we'll just recognize her at that time. I think what might be helpful is both to hear from the practitioners on the task force, both those who are, in the field representing firefighters, but also those attorneys, and sort of what are the obstacles that you all face when addressing firefighters who've been injured in the line of duty and have in such a way that they now have contracted cancer. I know we've heard testimony in the past, but I think it'd be helpful for us as a group to hear from you again about what the challenges are.
I guess I'll go first. Thank you, Senator. It's really a burden of proof issue. That's really the main obstacle that we face. Unfortunately, making something a conclusive presumption, like we did with the Hart and hypertension statute, raises all kinds of constitutional issues, and probably wouldn't survive a constitutional challenge. The closest you could probably, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, probably the closest you could get would be to have a rebuttable presumption that could be rebutted only with clear and convincing evidence. That would probably be the closest thing you could get that would survive a constitutional challenge. The other issues become that we face with the Hart and Hypertension Act, and one of the reasons it was repealed. What happened there was once it failed the constitutional challenge, then it became bonus legislation, which took it out of workers' comp, even though the claims continued to be administered in the Workers' Comp Commission, which means that had 2 consequences. One is it became something that could not be insured, created an insurability issue. And so the municipalities had to be self-insured for these claims. And also it made workers' comp benefits are not taxable. And these benefits, because they were not regarded as workers' comp, became taxable to the firefighters. And so those are just a couple of issues that come to mind.
If I could maybe elaborate on what Bud said. He's absolutely right. The Heart and Hypertension Act is sort of a template where heart disease and hypertension back in the 50s and 60s was made a rebuttable presumption. Chief, you mentioned you wanted this to maybe be an irrebuttable presumption. That was tried back in 1971 and found to be unconstitutional. The legislature made heart disease or hypertension an actual irrebuttable presumption. In its cases, Ducharme versus Putnam, and the site is 161 Connecticut 135 So I think that's a non-starter, although it would be great. The solution that the court actually gave to the legislature was to make it this bonus legislation, as Bud mentioned. The problem with it was that the insurance carriers quickly challenged their duty to indemnify the municipalities. So we had all these little towns picking up the bill for these heart and hypertension claims. It got very expensive and eventually was repealed for that reason. I think the way to go would probably be a rebuttable presumption. That way the municipalities at least would have an opportunity to defend some claims. For example, if it's lung cancer, maybe the person was a smoker, family history, and so on. But I think that's probably the direction that would need to be taken.
I also, it's my understanding, if I may jump back in here. It's also my understanding that Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, New York, Pennsylvania all have some kind of firefighter cancer relief laws. So the wheel has been invented, at least in those states.
Okay, that's good to know, and something maybe we can look at our next meeting and have someone come prepared to present on those, sort of the status of firefighter cancer funds in other states. That would be really helpful to understand how they are addressing the issues.
Senator, I'm sorry, could I make comment here?
Of course.
As I mentioned, my firm is about helping firefighters. You got firefighters on staff. I don't think there's anybody that disagrees that firefighters shouldn't have appropriate benefits for whatever injury they are and for cancer. The issue is what's the best way to handle that and the most cost effective. Because we operate in 39 states, I've seen these conversations before. I see in most states not enough time or money is spent on prevention. When someone's got cancer, the horse is out of the barn. If more money could be devoted to prevention in the form of getting everybody, 2 sets of turnout gear, annual physicals, maybe body scans, what have you, the more, the survivability rate is much higher if you catch these things early, and there's not enough money spent on prevention. People don't have adequate funds. So when I look at the situation, workers' comp is the most expensive way to provide these benefits. There are other ways to do it. Florida is an example where they have taken cancer out of the comp world, and they wrote legislation, and this legislation was driven by the Florida Professional Firefighters Association with 27,000 members, and they moved it to where each municipality, fire department, fire district has to provide certain benefits, and they do that via critical illness policy and long-term disability. That critical illness policy pays, you can choose any amount, but pays $25,000 upon diagnosis. There's in that a $75,000 death benefit. The entities are mandated to provide health care and long-term disability. It's a much less expensive way. If you look at comp, there's a recent California study. In California, it costs in California comp 48 cents to develop $1 of benefit. The median across the country in that study says it costs 25 cents to provide $1 benefit in the comp world. The difficulty is pricing for these long-term benefits when it's done so much less expensive. I believe there's different sections you buy on, because the municipality or fire district can provide the death benefit or there's a couple different choices, but you're talking about under $300 per firefighter a year. In states where they've gone with a basically strict liability for cancer, rates went up immediately 90%. Now, I don't know whether you're insured, the insurers here in this state could afford that type of hit, because otherwise, you have, nobody wanted to provide the coverage, and you've got other issues. And it's very costly to provide in that mechanism, because the, pricing for comp, you've got one chance to price for it. There's a lot of conservatism in it. when, disability insurers can price every year, health insurers can price every year. But more importantly, if we look at there's never enough money to fund things, that if one could save the money by not putting in comp and provide the kind of prevention that gives firefighters, a better chance of either avoiding cancer or surviving it. To me, that's a no-brainer. And so Florida is a really good example. Again, the Firefighters Professional Organization drove this. They're very happy. The people that run that would be willing to talk to anybody from Connecticut here about why they felt that way and why so far they're very happy with how it's worked, because they're the ones that design the legislation and the benefits that they wanted for their constituents there. And again, I don't think anybody can argue. And if we can prevent someone getting cancer, that's something we should be doing.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I did hear from another comp attorney who said the same thing, that we should be investing in prevention. And I'm sure I can't imagine anyone who would disagree with that. And clearly, any information you have about that, and having the 2 sets of gear is one of the most common themes we heard. And I do think that we need to address that issue as well. But I think for this task force, our top priority is to study the fund and make sure that the funds that were set aside, that those are going to be used, and then look at what obstacles there are to receiving those funds, and then also look at the workers' comp system. That is part of our original charge. I appreciate what you're saying. And what I would suggest is that folks who have information, like the information about the Florida fund, if you could provide that information to our clerk, Devin Avshalom Smith, he'll make sure that every member of the task force then receives a copy of it. So we can use the clerk's office as sort of like a clearinghouse for information as well. So if folks have examples of other states that they want to share with us, we would appreciate.
Sure, we can get the stuff from Florida. Interesting enough, it's a competitive situation where there's 4 or 5 entities, Chubb and others, big companies providing this product because they see it as viable. Versus if you look at workers' comp for firefighters in most states, I have one competitor and that's it, because everybody's so scared of the presumption laws and inability to price it. And look, there's 840 comp classes. Most of them you have 30, 40 markets providing coverage. In firefighting, there's 1, 2, 3. Most of them are state funds providing the coverage, and the state funds, in some cases, don't provide particularly great claim service, or they certainly don't provide the kind of risk control we do to help people prevent injury. So again, my hope is that people will give other alternatives serious consideration, because there's never enough money to fund this. And if you want to get really good benefits for firefighters, including the prevention, I don't see how you can argue against that. And there aren't enough dollars to go around, that you got to seriously consider not going with comp and going with some other mechanism.
Thank you. I did see that Representative Aurora had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kushner. I just wanted to, in the interest of building the background, because I was not a part of the discussion in the past, from the experts who do have the knowledge, could you talk to especially, I think, Mr. Adamson, Bill, you would have quite some, perhaps, or maybe Mr. Hart, you would have data or information on this. What is the incidence we are talking about? In a sense that when I look at a problem, I always want to say, okay, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about an incidence of if there are, roughly 5,000, career firefighters and 20,000 volunteer firefighters, at any given time in Connecticut? What is the nature of incidents? Is it 0.1%? And how do you kind of think about it? Are we talking about helping 200 firefighters every year, 20 firefighters every year, or 2,000 firefighters every year? So that we can build in our mind what is the kind of problem we have, which we are trying to address. And secondly, from a point of view of the cost, what is a typical once diagnosed? and attributed to the job. What is the cost we are talking about, for per year or over a period of time? If there were any numbers which were already studied on, that would be great to hear. If there are some heuristics numbers which you all use in this discussion, we'd love to hear that.
Thank you, Representative Aurora. And I did see Rick Hart's hand was up, so why don't we start there?
Thanks, Senator. First of all, Mr. Adamson, there are the International Association of Firefighters does put out an advisory as to cancer prevention, doing gross decon, which would remove after a fire, which would remove 80% of the contaminants from a firefighter, reducing the risk by that same amount. Having wipes, disinfecting wipes on the apparatus, and having 2 sets of gear and a change of station wear when they return to the firehouse, which basically reduces the potential for exposure by close to 100%. Obviously, we'll never hit 100%, but we're getting by these measures developed by departments on an individual basis have reduced the amount, the number of cancer cases. It's every 169 fiefdoms in this state, over 300 fire departments. It's kind of difficult to mandate it and to enforce these measures, but proactive fire departments have taken it on because they realize this is an issue. Firefighter cancer deaths surpasses all other forms of death, line of duty deaths on the career side in the country as of today. So it's a real problem. I always go to the NIOSH report, which was a very comprehensive report or a study done with over 50,000 firefighters over approximately 50 years. And they came to the conclusion that it was cancer and firefighting are walk hand in hand. Dr. Phil Landrigan out of New York City did a study on the New York City firefighters and cancer. His numbers match up with the NIOSH report. The Nordic study that was done over in Europe, those numbers match up with the numbers in NIOSH. They all are coming up with the same risks that we in the numbers and the prevalence of cancer. Even the American Cancer Society has come out with a study that said that firefighters are getting cancers at an earlier age, 30s and 40s, that people in their 70s are supposed to get. They're not supposed.
I think you're frozen, Rick. I don't know if you can hear us, but can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Supposed to get, but generally get. So
Yeah,
it is
you
a real
do it.
issue. And Representative Aurora Weeks is with the Waterbury Fire Department. At the time we were doing the legislation, we had 220 members in the department. And, oh, am I back yet?
You are
Yes.
back, but Liz, you kind of cut off right after you talked about the American Cancer Society study. So if you want to start up there and then come to the Waterbury.
Oh, okay. So the American Cancer Society published a study that said that firefighters are getting cancers in their 30s and 40s, where the general public is getting them in their 70s and 80s, which lends again to the fact that firefighting is causing cancer. And just as a point of reference to Representative Aurora, we don't have the numbers as far as an accurate figure as to how many firefighters in Connecticut have been diagnosed with cancer. But I will tell you that in Waterbury in 2016, when I was working there as a deputy chief, we had 8 members in a 220-man department that were simultaneously diagnosed with cancer. So the numbers are real. If we could get an accurate number, I think this would not be an argument that we'd be having. It would have been done a long time ago. So that's I wish we did have the numbers.
So if I heard you correctly, I think you were saying, Rick, that there's been a reduction in diagnoses since some of the measures that you've taken to prevention measures that both you and Mr. Addison spoke about. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, from everything I've read, it does seem as if we're trending in the right direction as a result of the identification of preventative measures that we can take by doing gross decon, which means when you come out of a fire, you're basically hosed down to wash all the gross contaminants that are on your turnout gear, which would reduce, according to the international, approximately 80% of your exposure to carcinogens. And then the further usage of disinfectant wipes that we're all unfortunately too familiar with nowadays, to clean your face and neck where you have the greatest exposure for contaminants. And also the department's having 2 sets of turnout gear, which is the firefighting gear that you see us wear, as well as 2 hoods, so that you always have a clean set of gear. One important grant that FEMA has been, through the Assistant to Firefighter grants, has been funding the purchase of gear extractors, which are basically gigantic industrial washing machines that we put our turnout gear in after a fire, and it extracts through pressure and washing the contaminants out of the turnout gear. And departments all across the state have been purchasing these because of the push to reduce cancer.
Well, in the old days, as you know, a lot of people kept their gear by their beds and slept at the house. And of course, that's 20 years ago. But, you know, they used to be viewed as a badge of honor to have dirty gear. And now we're the exact opposite. But there's so many other things to be done on the prevention side. You know, in the fire ground, a lot of times the firefighters are right by the truck. There's exhaust fumes. They've got new mechanisms. I think they cost $5,000 per truck, where it makes the exhaust fumes disappear, so people aren't breathing them out on the fire ground. So there's a lot that can be done, but also the regular physicals, body scans, colonoscopies. You can have genetic tests. We had a customer that had to get grants, cost $250,000 to get his whole staff out in Arizona to get these body scans. They discovered rare cancer in a guy that saved his life just through the body scans. And so again, it's about early detection, but all that costs a lot of money to get that type of activity. And, you know, you've got a high percentage of volunteers in the state. What is it, about 4,000 or 5,000 career, Mr. Hart, and maybe 20,000 volunteers? Is that the right numbers? Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's about 22,000 volunteers and 6,000 career.
You know, so there's a lot more that can be done. And again, nobody's going to argue that we shouldn't do what's necessary to help prevent cancer for firefighters. And then obviously provide them where they do appropriate benefits for them and their families. And where there's, you know, death, obviously they should be getting, you know, death benefits, line of duty death.
I think it would be helpful to hear again from the attorneys who work on the workers' comp cases to describe a little bit about what are the issues you face when you go into that system for a claim.
Well, I can say that occupational disease claims are difficult. There's some that are well established, asbestosis, that type of thing. I have not had a cancer case with a firefighter. I've had other occupational disease claims, but they're difficult. I think the rebuttable presumption, as I mentioned, would give a leg up to everybody. I haven't studied which cancers are more prevalent in firefighters, and maybe one of you who's gone into this, Chief, perhaps you would be able to, you know, delineate which cancer is most common in firefighters. I'm not sure if every cancer is more prevalent or just certain ones.
You've got prostate cancer is a higher incidence according to the stats for firefighters, for example.
And that's very treatable typically.
Right, if you get it caught early.
Right, right.
But, there are, as pointed out earlier, there aren't a lot of really good stats. It's all held with healthcare insurers over the years, and they don't track it by firefighter. There is an incidence. The difficulty with any presumption, in my opinion, is that, not all cancers are caused by the firefighting. Some is caused by genetics, and some is caused by lifestyle. And you're arguing over whether, in the comp world, whether that meets whatever the statute says is covered. And we waste a lot of time, in those cases of, debating, litigating, what have you, when, what I look at in Florida is, when someone's diagnosed with cancer, they get an immediate check for 25 grand to help with co-pays and deductibles, and then other disabilities provided for them on a long-term basis. And it's hassle-free. I mean, if you got cancer, do you really want to have it argued and have to testify and all that? Well, my cancer case has got to be, litigated in the industrial commission or what have you. That's just wrong. It's a waste of money. Let's get something that's automatic, that's, cost effective, so we can spend more money on prevention. Every firefighter should be getting, in my opinion, a physical every year with some sort of maintenance on cancer. There's a lot of other cancer detection things out there, but some are not cheap.
Now with the number,
some of the stats that we see, there's an NCCI study who so far has not wanted a rate. That's the other problem with NCCI won't rate for cancer or any of the presumptions, is that it's a 25% higher incidence for firefighters, and that probably one out of 5 is coming from firefighting. Now, again, we don't have stats. That's one entity's opinion. The point is that the firefighters need to be covered, and they don't need to have it argued about. They need to get a quick decision so they can have the energy to fight, deal with the personal problems that a cancer victim has. And, again, catching these things early, it's so important. I mean, we had one case where, the guy just didn't get it done early, and 5 years in, he didn't have the test, the colonoscopies, because he refused, and now he's got serious cancer. When, if he caught it in stage 1, have been easily treatable.
I think that Attorney Morrissey was trying to add something there. Were you?
I was just curious with these rates that you quoted, and I guess I'm thinking more of the professional firefighters, because I found that most municipal employees have pretty good health insurance that would probably cover, if not all, most of the bills for treatment of cancer. Was most of that rate for the medical portion, or was it indemnity, or were those split up in any way?
I'm looking at my breakout here. It's for the $25,000 immediate payment. I think it's $82 per firefighter. The $75,000 death benefit was $60, and then a bunch of reimbursements on the medical. People have to have a major medical program. I think it's $38. So yeah, they have to have medical coverage.
Well, my question was more for California, where you cited that the rates went up.
No, the California study I cited is the percentage of money spent to develop a dollar of benefits. It's a recent California, it's called the California State of the Workers' Comp Market. It's about 90 odd pages, and in there they have a sheet that talks about what it takes to develop a dollar of benefits in the comp world. And again, in California, it was 48 cents to deliver a dollar. The median across the country by their analysis is 25 cents. Medicare, for example, they say it only costs 2 cents to provide a dollar of benefit.
So again, my question was, did they divide that to indemnity versus healthcare, the medical?
No, they did not.
Is that all you have?
Well, I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, I suppose you could develop something where it could be an indemnity only type payout, so people could use their health insurance if available, but then there'd be a source of income while they're out of work, recovering perhaps through the comp system. I realize this is all preliminary. There's no reason you couldn't just provide indemnity benefits without medical benefits. which I assume are a large part of those costs.
So it's Vaughn, if I can just touch real quick, the claims will be a wage replacement claim, which has a structure to it as set by the CSFA. This is not an insurance claim benefit. This is more that we verify somebody has contracted one of the 9 cancers identified in the bill as while they're doing their duty as firefighter. It's been documented, verified by both a physician and the fire chief. They submit their form and they are getting wage replacement funds back to assist in their normal day-to-day lives, to pay bills, rents, groceries, things of that nature. This is not an insurance claim type policy.
What's in effect right now is not.
And my understanding was that it was also intended to, that in these cases, people were going through the workers' comp system. Is that correct? So in other words, this fund, when it was conceived, would be something that would be there for the immediate use of the firefighter and the family that would sustain them while they're going through the workers' comp process.
Unfortunately, Senator, there is a provision in the statute that if you apply for workers' comp benefits for the treatment, for the diagnosis of cancer, it precludes you from applying for the wage replacement benefits and vice versa. So you actually would forfeit your workers' comp claim.
I wasn't aware of that. That makes it.
The overarching concern was that people were on the other CCM was afraid of people gaming the system. Why somebody with cancer would game the system, I don't understand their logic, but that was what they said, that people would double dip. They'd try and get the wage replacement benefits and they tried to get the workers' comp benefits as well. I just think it's, I just, for the life of me, I don't understand why people would think firefighters that are exposing themselves to these known carcinogens, and this isn't just something pulled out of the air. It's from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or the National Toxicology Program, that identify these carcinogens that we're exposed to. Why we would be forced to, number one, use our own insurance that obviously would create a higher level of experience, thus causing rates to go up. And why would we be forced to use our own sick vacation time, what have you, in order to receive treatment when we were injured? This is nothing more than if you break your leg and you fell off a ladder, workers' comp will cover you. But when it comes to cancer, because they are fearful of the cost, it's the same type of an injury, and I believe it should be covered under workers' comp. We did the same thing with the PTSD bill. People were worried about people abusing the system, but we got it into workers' comp because there are safeguards. There's safeguards in the bill. You have to submit to blood tests every year. That's part of the prevention. You have to have an annual physical. It's not required to be a NFPA 1582 physical, but an annual physical with blood work would go well along the way to help with prevention. But I mean, we are talking about the wage replacement statute and why it's inadequate. And those are some of the reasons why it's inadequate, that we have to still use our own insurance. We still have to use our own time, even though we're the wage replacement will pay for our time. But the ancillary benefits that obviously the workers' comp attorneys can speak better to this than I, but the important thing is to take care of the families should the member die. or become debilitated to the point where they cannot return to work. There's no protection for them at this point. They lose all rights and privileges if they do not hit their 25 years or 20 years, whatever retirement age is. So that's where this wage replacement program is lacking. And it's a huge hole that we've created.
Senator Kushner, could I ask a question for clarification here?
Of course.
I really would appreciate if we could have a statement of the problem, because as we are evolving, I know some of members in the committee have much more experience than others. If we are talking about a wage and what is already approved under the existing law, perhaps some on our side in the legislature our aides might be able to help us with that, as to what is already approved in the law and what is not. In a sense, this is only wage replacement for existing firemen or firefighters, or is it just for career, or both, or is it for any firefighter who has ever served in the state of Connecticut? Secondly, is this insurable? Because under the rules of insurance, or what they call the economics of insurance, which works is if something can be specifically identified to a certain group, which I'm hearing over and over again, this is specific to this group, which is firefighters take on onerous amount of work, which puts them in harm's way of cancer. And if it is specifically to that group, it's and that risk is not exposed to the general public, then it under the laws of insurance, under the economic laws of insurance, not laws of insurance from a point of view of legal laws, under the economics of insurance, it is best to actually segregate that cost. And then howsoever, whether the legislative assembly pays it, or whether the firefighter pays it, or meaning the firefighting agency pays it, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. And the reason that makes sense also is because then the person who pays the premium, whether it is us as a legislators, legislative assembly, or whether it is the people's money, or whether it is a firefighting agency, they will also make sure that to keep their premium low, they will take all precautions. And so that gets built in. And I'm hearing over and over that, hey, we'd rather people not get the cancer than get the cancer, and for us to help them. And the incentive should be in that premium process. So without taking any more time, what I would love or appreciate is if there were a backgrounder as to, are we looking at, number one, what is the extent of the problem we're trying to solve? Because it can be a 400,000 problem, or it can be 40 million problem, because it depends upon the number of firefighters. Income replacement can be very expensive, as we all know, but at the same time, it's very necessary at many times. So to the extent that we can define the problem up front, if it has already been defined, perhaps forward it to people like myself who do not yet understand it, I would really kind of appreciate that technique, or that form of methodology.
Thank you, Representative Aurora. And I will ask our clerk of labor to send out a copy of the paper that OLR did on this in 2018. It does give you a pretty good idea of what the legislation was intended and what is required in terms of the fund. And so that's a 5-page report that I think will help with your understanding. I do see several hands, but I want to go to Representative Porter first. Let's see, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted or. Rep. Porter, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, so I'm actually on.
Oh, we're.
My laptop and the telephone, so I'm using the phone because I have an unstable connection. But I just wanted to go back to what our friend Rick Hart was talking about, to see if we could get some of the workers' comp attorneys to respond to his statement regarding, what all he's mentioning around the wage replacement and the concern around firefighters double dipping. Like, what does that look like? Because this really is a study to, study the benefits for them that would be related to workers' comp. And then there's also been statements that there's a better way to do this. So could we just address that in this conversation at this point, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in.
Go ahead.
I'm not understanding what the double dip would look like. My concern would be if a firefighter with cancer came into my office was, how are we going to prove this? Because as it stands now, it's the firefighter's burden of proof, and he or she would have to show that more likely than not, exposures in the course of their duty was more likely than not the cause of the cancer. And since cancer is so prevalent in our society, it's going to be a tough case. Not an impossible case, but a tough case. And I've handled a variety of cancer cases over the years, so I can speak with some degree of experience on this. So that, for me as a lawyer, is the number one hurdle if we're going to bring this into the comp system. And that's why establishing some kind of presumption would go a long way. And again, we can't have a conclusive presumption, but if we can have a rebuttable presumption that can be rebutted only with clear and convincing evidence, then you throw the burden on the other side. Okay? But again, we're talking about litigation. We're talking about something that's not going to get money to a firefighter quickly. It's just the nature of these cases. It's something that's going to be protracted. There's no question about it.
Thank you for that response. Can you also just elaborate, because you do have many years of experience with this, in your cases where it has been proven, can you speak to what that looks like versus the hurdle you're talking about?
Yeah, none of them are easy cases, but the easier cases are you can establish the carcinogen that they were exposed to. You can establish how frequently they were exposed, the intensity of the exposure, and then have a physician, an expert in the area, offer an opinion that exposure, more likely than not, was an important factor in the development of the cancer. You can see that with firefighters, that's not going to be necessarily an easy task.
Right. I think that was my next question.
Yeah.
On average, how long? What does this process look like in the way of time?
Here's as I'm listening to people speak, and I'm thinking, while the statistics are growing and are becoming pretty overwhelmingly clear that there's a connection between what firefighters do and the development of cancer. Establishing that with an individual firefighter is an entirely different task and hurdle to get over. You follow me?
Yes,
I do. And I do appreciate you taking the time to elaborate on that and for the clarity. Thank you, Senator Kushner, for the time.
thank you. And just to respond to Representative Aurora, I do think you're correct in suggesting that it would be helpful to have a statement of the issues. I don't think there's one issue that we're charged with responsibility of looking at, but a number of issues. And so I think that one thing that we, as we prepare for the next meeting, that would be helpful is if each of the members of the task force would put forward, and I'm not talking about a major document, but those of you who have a framework who could point out to us, sort of a list of the issues that you think we ought to be addressing. The charge of our task force here is to report to the legislature for next session, so that we can, what seems clear is look at what needs to be done to better provide for firefighters who are contracting cancer. And there are many ways in which that needs to be addressed or could be addressed, but clearly $800,000 fund that we have right now, which is supposed to be dispersed starting next year, starting in a few weeks, that is not enough money to address all of the issues that we've heard about today. And so clearly the amount of money that would be necessary is an issue. We've heard about prevention as an issue. We've heard about from Mr. Hart about concern about the families who are either losing a loved one who through whom the entire family received medical benefits, also loss of income. So there are issues for the families as well as for those firefighters who survive. And so I think, getting a list of these issues would help us to focus our work and help us to focus the report. I don't see any other hands at this moment. Go ahead.
Senator Kushner, may I ask one more question of the experts or of the team of our group here?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. For those who have expertise, perhaps in insurance, my question would be, is there an insurance product for wage replacement available right now? First, for those who have, for any employee. So let's assume I work in the, in the legislature, or I work in the finance business. If I wanted to buy a product saying, hey, listen, if I develop something like that and cannot work, my wages should be replaced. Is that product available, and an idea on pricing? And secondly, for a subset, that if I am not just a regular employee working in the legislature or in finance or law, but I am also working as a firefighter, and I would like to buy an insurance product for wage replacement, is that product available? Because the reason I ask that is that if those products, either of those products are available, then our job becomes of understanding, especially for going forward, for firefighters going forward who haven't retired or who haven't been diagnosed so far, it becomes a little more kind of we can circle it much better. And I did not really, the introduction spent a little too fast for me. I didn't understand who had the expertise in the insurance world. If we could basically inquire on that, that would certainly be enhance the understanding of this group. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. And I don't see any hands up in terms of, but I do see, Bill, that you are unmuted. So perhaps establish.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are long-term disability policies that pay, wage replacement benefits, and they're bought on a group basis. You got into some specifics where if you were in another career, maybe volunteering, I can't comment on that. It's not my area of expertise, but most of the career fire departments across the country provide long-term disability coverage for their employees.
Would that include cancer, or does that exclude cancer?
Well, no, it doesn't. It's however you're not well, you're sick. So yeah, it would certainly cover for cancer.
And if we were to say, sorry, through you, Senator Kushner.
Oh, okay. Go ahead and finish your thought, but I do recognize there's another person with hand up. Just finish your thought there, though.
Oh, got it. Through you, if this fund were to say, listen, we would help in purchasing that kind of product for firefighters, whether either subsidize it or purchase it, would as a group, are the numbers very large in terms of, because we're talking about 6,000 career firefighters here, or is it something which is in the domain, something which can, at least we can try to investigate if that's a possibility?
I think it would be worth investigating. I mean, most of them buy it on a FD or muni basis in other states. but there's also thoughts that sometimes you can get a large group, the sort of the, I'll say the perfume of the premium is attractive and people will sharpen their pencils to try to provide the product for a big group. And there's probably economies when you have, a big purchase than when you've got, departments, say 20 people versus 50 versus 10. There may be some economies there, but again, haven't been in my career that segment, the disability policy.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's something we should as a task, as our study, does move ahead, something we definitely should look at, because that could solve, give us one area to define and solve the problem. And thank you, Senator.
If you decide that there are other ways beyond comp, I mean, one could write legislations that requires, the fire departments or munis to provide long-term disability on whatever basis that firefighters have to have this, and they can either buy a policy to do it or they can self-insure it. But, if it's written that way, so the firefighters all get their benefit, then one can look at the best economics by, local entity or on a statewide basis.
Certainly a possibility. I don't like it, but a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw, Rick, you have your hand up. Rick, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Just a point of reference, that long and short-term insurance was one of the issues that CCM brought up in 2016. And they immediately balked at the number. It was extremely expensive. I was trying to find the document where it listed where we had the actual costs for coverage. And that was taken off the table immediately due to the cost. So we'd have to get a more recent accounting.
Right.
Was that cost looked in comparison to what the increase in comp would be for some broad-based increase in presumption? I mean, one state I'm involved in went to almost a strict liability, and rates immediately went up 90%, and that's just the first step. So 90%. If you're paying $100,000 now for your comp and it goes up 90%. That's just a start. I mean, I think we've seen studies where average cost of cancer with indemnity, life benefits, and what have you is probably $250,000.
No, that wasn't brought up.
I mean, I think the challenge here is going to be cost. I think this was said at the outset that there isn't anyone who's going to say we don't think firefighters deserve our backing. Both in terms of taking care of them when they're ill and taking care of their families for the service they provide to our communities and to our state. No one is going to deny that this is something we need to do. The problem is always going to come back to cost. We've been down this road with rebuttable presumption. We worked on the issue of rebuttable presumption for COVID last year and had tremendous amount of pushback because it does always come back to cost. I myself am disturbed, and I did go back and looked at the materials that I had referenced and that I read prior to this meeting, and I had skipped over the important part that says that if you go under workers' comp, you're forfeiting the ability to make a claim on this cancer relief fund, and vice versa if you can't claim both. I'm not sure why it was constructed that way. We do have an example from last year where it hasn't gone into effect yet. It will go into effect in January, but the COVID relief fund that we set up for essential workers, you don't have to give up your right to be in the workers' comp system to draw down on that. And we worked it out so there wouldn't be double dipping per se, but that they would work together. And so I think there are some models we could look at that might be one thing we might want to examine in terms of going forward. I recognize from the attorneys that have spoke here today, and also from what we know about workers' comp and other attorneys we've spoken to, the difficult piece of this is to prove that in order to make a claim on workers' comp, it's very difficult to prove that the cancer was a result of your work. And it shouldn't be, I thought it was good, it was helpful the way you talked about there are studies that show that there's a correlation, but when it comes to proving it for an individual before workers' comp, it's much more difficult. And we know that these cases take a long time to work their way through the system. So I think, we ought to be at least looking at, are there supplementary ways in which we could help individuals who contract cancer, who have that diagnosis in accordance with the requirements that were set out by the Cancer Relief Fund, but that we could help people right away without them forfeiting their rights, either to workers' comp or to other insurance, disability claims that they might be processing. So I think that's worth looking at if we could address that issue. But that still doesn't address the issue of the families. So I think, I would be interested in hearing from folks what they think the obligation of municipalities or the state is to the families of the firefighters. And we don't have to do this today. It's 1:22. We've been in this discussion for nearly an hour and a half. We might want to spend, but it's something to think about. I would like to get some feedback from you all. The suggestion I made, and it was prompted by Representative Laura's question about putting together a list of the issues. And I think in doing so, you could also, and I see this much more as a list than I'm not asking any of you to provide a 50-page white paper on the issues as you see them, but more of a list for us to focus our conversations around to help us write the report, a list of the issues. And correspondingly, we've heard from a number of you, there are suggestions you have as well for ways in which we could address the problem. So does that sound like something you all would be prepared to do? Or is it more than you counted on when you were asked to join this task force?
So the question, if I may speak here.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that, getting everybody's ideas on a piece of paper always helps. So I would be very happy to put, a half-pager or one-pager for what I gather. But, I wanted to put forward 2 or 3 points, which from a fresh, because I come totally with a fresh, fresh pair of eyes on this issue. The first one is that the key issue is going to be to differentiate when the cancer is caused by profession versus caused by other things. So, I think, one of the things which we'll have to address that, how to resolve the litigation, reduce the litigation aspect of it. And I think that issue, as soon as you grasp with it, especially with somebody else who said that this is at the time when a firefighter is going through one of their most terrible, and their families are going through a very terrible life situation. So, there is one thing which always comes to mind is do not split that issue. Let's just try to solve an issue where, hey, what we know is that somebody has cancer. Nobody fakes cancer, for God's sake. What we know is that they're gonna need help, and so to the extent that we create a program which or we just what Bill said, maybe everybody should be forced to buy insurance for it, but if we think about that risk together, and I'm just kind of thinking about how to make it more manageable, because splitting it is just, I'm sure Attorney Poe would agree, is going to be a nightmare for everyone, because it's going to get litigated to no end. So the elegant solution would be if you combine that risk, that would have an elegance to it. So that's one of the things, when I've seen problems like this, sometimes it's the other alternate view. Do not even try to break it. Do not try to say, hey, these are the 5 factors, because these factors will evolve over time as science evolves. But since we know that firefighters have a higher percentage, even if it's 25% higher or 50% higher, that 25, then we are supposed to fund that 50% from our side, perhaps as an insurance premium, and the normal insurance premium of somebody getting cancer. And basically, people should be ready to rationally fund on their own. So that's kind of a thought which I had. I just wanted to put it on the table so that perhaps it doesn't make any sense because the numbers will be too large, as Rick said, Mr. Hart said, or perhaps this would be a good way to address the problem.
Thank you. I do think the other piece of this that I think might be helpful to us is if we asked for our next meeting, and I know we can ask the clerk to include staff from the Office of Legislative Research, because I think they could be helpful to us in pulling in the information, and we'll invite them to the next meeting. I'm not sure. I assume they were not invited to this meeting, or they would be on this call, knowing OLR. They're very responsible about attending these meetings. So we will touch base with OLR and give them a sense of what we've discussed here today and ask for their expertise in pulling together the information that's out there as well. Are there any other suggestions for today or comments that people want to make? Okay, I don't see any hands. What I would like to then suggest is that we for the next meeting, we're suggesting that we hold that 2 weeks from today on December 21st at the same time, 12 noon. And that will give us another opportunity to meet before the end of the year. Our charge did require that we submit a report January 1st, and I am told that if we make a request to extend the work of our committee to legislative leadership, that we will likely be granted that. So I also want to suggest at this time that we got a bit of a late start pulling together the task force, and with your agreement, we would like to extend the time that we have to continue this discussion. We are not in session until February 9th, and so hopefully that would give us an opportunity to meet again in January. And unless I see someone say, no, don't do that, I only agreed to serve until December 31st, then we will go ahead and proceed in that manner. So I don't see any objections, which is great. And I do want to thank everyone for being here today. It's been a great opening discussion, a lot of ideas, a lot of questions still. And I look forward to seeing you. If you can get us any of your documentation or any list that you have, we will follow up on some of the suggestions that have been made here to look at other states that we can get from OLR. And we will make sure to circulate anything we have with the whole task force. So with that, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, Representative Porter?
Thank you, Senator Kushner. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to just echo what you've said, just to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us and to be a part of this task force. This is a very important and critical issue, and I do look forward to finalizing something that will certainly suffice for these firefighters and their families. So thank you again, and thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you. So with that, here, seeing no hands, that will conclude our first meeting of the task force, and we will adjourn this meeting and meet again on November 21st at 12 noon. Thank you all so much, and it will be virtual like this. So thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Thank you.